Section 7 of the Perfumed Garden by Sheikh Nefzaoui. Translated by Richard Burton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Ali Makki. Chapter 9. The sundry names given to the sexual organs of women. Al-Farj, the slit. Abu Bal'oom, the glutton. Al-Kus, the vulva. Al-Muqa'war, the bottomless. Al-Qalmoon, the voluptuous. Abu Shafarain, the two-lipped. Al-As, the primitive. Abu Angara, the humpbacked. Al-Zarzur, the starling. Al-Ghurbal, the sieve. Al-Shaq, the chin. Al-Hazzaz, the restless. Abu Tartur, the one with a crest. Al-Lazzaz, the unionist. Abu Khushaym, the one with a little nose. Al-Mud, the accommodating. Al-Mu'in, the assistant. Al-Qunfudh, the hedgehog. Al-Masbul, the long one. Al-Sakuti, the silent one. Al-Malqi, the duelist. Al-Daqqaq, the crusher. Al-Harrab, the fugitive. Al-Thaqil, the importunate. Al-Sabir, the resigned. Al-Talib, the yearning one. Al-Musaffah, the barred one. Al-Hasan, the beautiful. Al-Mazur, the deep one. Al-Naffakh, the one that swells. Al-Addad, the biter. Abu Jabha, the one with a projection. Al-Massas, the sucker. Al-Zambur, the wasp. Al-Wasa', the vast one. Al-Har, the hot one. Al-Arid, the large one. Al-Ladhid, the delicious one. As regards to the vulva called Al-Farj, or the slit, it has this name because it opens and shuts again when hotly yearning for coitus, like the one of a mare in heat at the approach of the stallion. This word, however, is applied indiscriminately to the natural parts of men and women, for God the Supreme had used this expression in the Quran, chapter 33, volume 35. Al-Hafidhina furujahum wal-Hafidhat. The proper meaning of farj is slit, opening, or passage. People say, I have found a farj in the mountains, viz. a passage. There is a sukun upon the ra and a fatha upon the jim, and in this sense it means also the natural parts of woman. But if the ra is marked with a fatha, it signifies deliverance from misfortunes. The person who dreams of having seen the vulva or the farj of a woman will know that if he is in trouble, God will free him of it. If he is in perplexity, he will soon get out of it. And lastly, if he is in poverty, he will soon become wealthy, because farj, by transposing the vowels, will mean the deliverance from evil. By analogy, if he wants a thing, he will get it. If he has debts, they will be paid. It is considered more lucky to dream of the vulva as open, but if the one seen belongs to a young virgin, it indicates that the door of consolation will remain closed, and the thing which is desired is not obtainable. It is a proved fact that the man who sees in his dream the vulva of a virgin that has never been touched will certainly be involved in difficulties, and will not be lucky in his affairs. But if the vulva is open so that he can look well into it, or even it is hidden but he is free to enter it, he will bring the most difficult tasks to a successful end after having first failed in them, and this after a short delay, by the help of a person whom he never thought of. He who has seen in his dream a man busy upon a young girl, and when the same is getting off her has managed to see at that moment her vulva, will bring his business to a happy end, after having failed to do so, by the help of the man he has seen. If it is himself who did the girl's business, and he has seen her vulva, he will succeed by his own exertion to realize the most difficult problems, and be successful in every respect. Generally speaking, to see the vulva in dreams is a good sign, so it is of good augury to dream of coition, and he who sees himself in the act and finishing with the ejaculation will meet success in all his affairs. But it is not the same with the man who merely begins coition and does not finish it. He, on the contrary, will be unlucky in every enterprise. It is supposed that the man who dreams of being busy with a woman will afterwards obtain from her what he wants. The man who dreams of cohabiting with women with whom to have sexual intercourse is forbidden by religion, for instance his mother, his sister, etc., or the maharim, must consider this as a presage that he will go to sacred places, al-haram, and perhaps even journey to the holy house of God and look there upon the grave of the Prophet. As regards to the virile member, it has been previously mentioned that to dream of accident occurring to that organ means the loss of all remembrance and the extinction of the race. The sight of a pair of pantaloons or sirwal prognosticates the appointment to a post or a wilaya, by reason of the analogy of the letters composing the word sirwal with those arming by transposition the two words sir, or go, and wali, named go to the post for which you are named. It is related that a man who had dreamed that the Amir had given him a pair of pantaloons became Qadi. Dreaming of pantaloons is also a sign of protection for the natural parts, and foretells success in business. The almond, or lawz, a word composed of the same letters as zal, or to seize, seen in a dream by a man in trouble, means that he will be liberated from it; to a man who is ill, that he will be cured. In short, all misfortunes will give way. Somebody having dreamed that he was eating almonds asked the wise man the meaning of it. He received the answer that by reason of the analogy of the letters in lawz and zal, the ills that beset him would disappear, and the event justified the explanation. The sight of a molar tooth, or dars, in a dream indicates eternity. The man, therefore, who has seen his tooth drop out, may be sure that his enemy is dead. This arises from the word dars, signifying both enemy and a molar, and one can say at that same time, it is my tooth and it is my enemy. The window, or taga, and the shoe, or the madas, reminds you of women. The vulva resembles, in fact, when invaded by the verge, a window with a man putting his head into it to look about, or a shoe that is being put on. Consequently, he who sees himself in dreaming in the act of going in at a window or putting on a shoe has the certainty of getting possession of a young woman or a virgin if the window is newly built, or the shoe is new and in good condition. But that woman will be old according to the state of the window or shoe. The loss of a shoe foretells to a man the loss of his wife. To dream of something folded together, and which gets open, predicts that a secret will be divulged and made public. The same remaining folded up indicates, on the other hand, that the secret will be kept. If you dream of reading a letter, you will know that you will have news, which will be, according to the nature of the contents of the letter, good or bad. The man who dreams of passages in the Quran or the traditions of Hadith will, from the subjects treated therein, draw his conclusion. For instance, the passage, "He will grant you the help of God and immediate victory," will signify to him victory and triumph. "Certainly God has the decision in his hands," or "Heaven will open and offer its numerous portals," and other similar passages indicate success. A passage treating of punishment prognosticates punishment. From those treating of benefits, a lucky event may be concluded. Such is the passage in the Quran which says, "He who forgives sins is terrible in his inflictions." Dreams about poetry and songs contain their explanation in the contents of the objects of the dream. He who dreams of horses, mules, or asses may hope for good, for the Prophet, God's salutation and goodness be with him, has said, "Men's fortunes are attached to the forelocks of their horses till the day of resurrection." And it is written in the Quran, "God the Highest has thus willed it that they serve you for mounts and for state." The correctness of these prognostications is not subject to any doubt. He who dreams of seeing himself mounted upon an ass as a career, and arriving at his destination, will be lucky in all things. But he who tumbles off the ass on his way is advised that he will be subject to accidents and misfortunes. The fall of a turban from the head predicts ignominy, as the turban being the Arab's crown. If you see yourself in a dream with naked feet, it means loss, and the bare head has the same significance. By transposing the letters, other analogies may be arrived at. These explanations are not here in their place, but I have been induced to give them in this chapter on account of the use of which they may be put. Persons who wish to know more on this subject have only to consult the treatise of Ibn Sirin. I now return to the names given to the sexual parts of woman. Al-Kus, or the vulva. This word serves as the name of a young woman's vulva in particular. Such a vulva is very plump and round in every direction, with long lips and grand slit, the edges well divided and symmetrical and rounded. It is soft, seductive, perfect throughout. It is the most pleasant and no doubt the best of all the different sorts. May God grant us the possession of such a vulva. Amen. It is warm, tight, and dry, so much that one might expect to see fire burst from it. Its form is graceful, its odor pleasant. The whiteness of its outside sets off its carmine red middle. There is no imperfection about it. Al-Qalmun, the voluptuous, the name given to the vulva of a young virgin. Al-As, or the primitive, this is a name applicable to every kind of vulva. Al-Zarzur, the starling, the vulva of a very young girl, or as others pretend, of a brunette. Al-Shaq, or the chink, the vulva of a bony, lean woman. It is like a chink in a wall, with not a vestige of flesh. May God keep us from it. Abu Tartur, or the crested one. It is the name given to a vulva furnished with a red comb like that of a cock, which rises at the moment of enjoyment. Abu Khushaym, the snub nose, is a vulva with thin lips and small tongue. Al-Qunfudh, the hedgehog, the vulva of the old, decrepit woman, dried up with age and with bristly hair. As-Sukuti, the silent one. This name has been given to the vulva that is noiseless. The member may enter 100 times a day, but will not say a word, and will be content to look on without a murmur. Ad-Daqqaq, the crusher, so called from its crushing movements upon the member. It generally begins to push the member, directly it enters, to the right and to the left, and to grip it with a matrix, and would, if it could, absorb also the two testicles. Al-Thaqil, the importunate. This is the vulva which is never tired of taking in the member. This latter might pass 100 nights with it, and walk in 100 times every night. Still that vulva would not be sated. Nay, it would still want more, and it would not allow the member to come out again at all if it was possible. With such a vulva the parts are exchanged. The vulva is the pursuer, the member is pursued. Luckily it is a rarity, and only found in a small number of women, who are wild with passion, all on fire and in flame. Al-Talib, the yearning one. This vagina is met with in a few women only. With some it is natural, with others it becomes what it is by long abstinence. It is burning for a member, and having got one in its embraces, it refuses to part with it until its fire is completely extinguished. Al-Hasan, the beautiful. This is the vulva which is white, plump, in form vaulted like a dome, firm and without any deformity. You cannot take your eyes off it, and to look at it changes a feeble erection into a strong one. Al-Nafakh, the swelling one, so called because a torpid member coming near it and rubbing its head against it a few times at once swells and stands upright. To the woman who has such a one it procures excessive pleasure, for at the moment of crisis it opens and shuts convulsively, like the vulva of a mare. Abu Jabha, the one with a projection. Some women have this sort of vulva which is very large, with a pubis prominent like a projecting fleshy forehead. Al-Wasa', the vast one, a vulva surrounded by very large pubis. Women of that build are said to be of large vagina, because although the root seems likely to be passed in, as soon as it feels the friction of the glands against its center, it opens wide at once. Al-Arid, the large one. This is the vulva which is as wide as it is long, that is to say, fully developed all round, from side to side, and from pubis to the perineum. It is the most beautiful to look upon, as the poet said. It has the splendid whiteness of a forehead. In its dimensions it is like the moon. The fire that radiates from it is like the sun's, and seems to burn the member which approaches. Unless first moistened with saliva, the member cannot enter. The odour it emits is full of charms. It is also said that this name applies to the vagina of women who are plump and fat. When such a one crosses her thighs one over the other, the vulva stands out like the head of a calf. If she lays it bare, it resembles a sa' of corn placed between her thighs, and if she walks, it is apparent under her clothes by its wary movement at each step. May God in His goodness and generosity let us enjoy such a vagina. It is of all the most pleasing, the most celebrated, the most wished for. Abu Bal'um, the glutton, the vulva with a vast capacity for swallowing. If such a vulva has not been able to get coitus for some time, it fairly engulfs the member that then comes near it, without leaving any trace of it outside, like as a man who is famished flings himself upon viands that are offered to him, and would swallow them without mastication. Al-Muqawar, the bottomless. This is the vagina of indefinite length, having in consequence the matrix lying very far. It requires a member of large dimensions, many better than it succeed in This name is given to the amply developed vagina of an excessively stout woman. Also to vaginas, the lips of which have become flaccid owing to weakness, and are long and pendulous. Abu Angara, the humpback. This vulva has the mouth of veals prominent and hard, standing out like a hump on the back of the camel, and reaching down between the thighs like the head of a cock. May God let us enjoy such a vulva. Amen. al-Ghurban, or the sea. This vulva, on receiving a member, seems to sift it all over, below, right and left, fore and aft, until the torment of pleasure arrives. Al-Hazzaz, or the restless. When this vagina has received the member, it begins to move violently and without interruption until the member touches the matrix, and then knows no repose till it has hastened on the enjoyment and finished its world. Al-Lazzaz, the unionist. The vagina which, having taken in the member, clings to it and pushes itself forward upon it so closely that if the thing were possible it would enfold the two testicles. Al-Mud, the accommodating. This name is applied to the vagina of a woman who has felt for a long time an ardent wish for coition. In rapture with the member it sees, it is glad to second its movements of come and go. It offers its matrix to the member by pressing it forward within reach, which is, after all, the best gift it can offer. Whatever place inside of it the member wants to explore, this vulva will make him welcome to, gracefully according to its wish. There is no corner it will not help the member to reach. Al-Masbul, the long one. This name applies only to some vulvas. Everyone knows that vulvas are far from being all the same in conformation and aspect. This vulva extends from the pubis to the anus. It lengthens out when the woman is lying down or standing, and contracts when she is sitting, differing in this respect from the vulva of a round shape. It looks like a splendid cucumber lying between the thighs. With some women it shows projecting under light clothing, or when they are bending back. Al-Mulqi, the duelist. This vulva which, on the introduction of a member, executes the movement of coming and going, pushes itself upon it for fear of its retiring before the pleasure arrives. There is no enjoyment for it but the shock given to its matrix by the member, and it is for this that it projects its matrix to grip and suck the member's gland when the ejaculation takes place. Certain vulvas, wild with desire and lust, be it natural or in consequence of long abstention, throws themselves upon the approaching member, opening the mouth like a famished infant, to whom the mother offers the breast. In the same way, this vulva advances and retires upon the member, to bring it face to face with the matrix, as if in fear, unaided, it could not find the same. The vulva and the member resembles thus two skillful duelists. Each time that one of them rushes its antagonist, the latter opposes its shield to parry the blow and repulse the assault. The member represents the sword, and the matrix the shield. The one who first ejaculates the sperm is vanquished, while the one who is slowest is the victor. And assuredly it is a fine fight. I should like thus to fight without stopping to the day of my death. As the poet says, I have let them see the effect of a subtle shadow, spinning like an ever-busy spider. They said to me, how long will you go on? I answered them, I will work till I am dead. Al-Harrab, the fugitive. The vagina which, being very tight and short, is hurt by the penetration of a very large and soft member, it tries to escape to the right and left. It is thus, people say, like the vagina of most virgins, which, not yet having made the acquaintance of the member, and fearful of its approach, tries to get out of its way when it glides in between the thighs and wants to be admitted. As-Sabir, the resigned. This is the vulva which, having admitted the member, submits patiently to all its whims and movements. It is also said that this vulva is strong enough to suffer resignedly the most violent and prolonged coitus. If it were assaulted 100 times, it would not be vexed or annoyed, and instead of venting reproaches, it would give thanks to God. It will show the same patience if it had to do with several members who visit it successively. This kind of vagina is found in women of a glowing temperament. If they only knew how to do it, they would not allow the man to dismount, nor his member to retire for a single moment. Al-Musaffah, the barred one. This kind of vagina is not often met with. The defect which distinguished it is sometimes natural, sometimes it is the result of an unskillfully executed operation of circumcision upon the woman. It can happen that the operator makes a false move with his instrument and injures the two lips, or even only one of them. In healing, these form a thick scar, which bars the passage, and in order to make the vagina accessible to the member, a surgical operation and the use of the basturi will have to be resorted to. Al-Murur, the deep one. The vagina, which always has the mouth open, and the bottom of which is beyond sight, the longest members only can reach it. Al-Addad, the biter. The vulva, which, when the member has got into it and is burning with passion, opens and shuts again upon the same fiercely. It is chiefly when the ejaculation is coming that the man feels the head of his member bitten by the mouth of the matrix, and certainly there is an attractive power in the same when it clings to the gland, yearning for sperm, and draws it in as far as it can. If God in his power has decreed that the woman shall become pregnant, the sperm gets concentrated in the matrix, where it is gradually vivified. But if on the contrary God does not permit the conception, the matrix expels the seed, which then runs over the vagina. Al-Massas, the sucker. This is a vagina which, in its amorous heat, in consequence of voluptuous toyings or of long abstinence, begins to suck the member which has entered it so forcibly as if to deprive it of all its sperm, dealing with it as a child drawing on the breast of the mother. The poets have described it in the following verse. She, the woman, shows in turning up her robe, an object, the vulva, developed full and round, in semblance like a cup turned upside down. In placing thereupon your hand, you seem to feel a well-formed bosom, springy, firm, and full. In boring in your lance, it gets well bitten, and drawn in by suction, as the breast is by a child. And after having finished, if you wish to recommence, you'll find it flaming hot as any furnace. Another poet, may God grant all his wishes in paradise, has composed on the same theme the following lines. Like to a man extended on his chest, she, the vulva, fills the hand, which has to be well stretched to cover it. The places it occupies is standing forth like an unopened bud of the blossom of a plum tree. Assuredly the smoothness of its skin is like the beardless cheek of adolescence. Its conduct is but narrow, the entrance to it is not easy, and he who essays to get in feels as though he was butting against a coat of mail. And at the introduction it emits a sound like to the tearing of a woven stuff. The member, having filled its cavity, receives the lively welcome of a bite, such as the nipple of the nurse receives when placed between the nursling's lips for suction. Its lips are burning like a fire that is lighted, and how sweet it is, this fire, how delicious for me. Az-Zambur, the wasp. This kind of vulva is known by the strength and roughness of its fur. When the member approaches and tries to enter, it gets stung by the hairs as if by a wasp. Al-Har, the hot one. This is one of the most praiseworthy vulvas. Warmth is in fact very esteemed in a vulva, and it may be said that the intensity of the enjoyment afforded by it is in proportion to the heat it develops. Poets have praised it in the following verse. The vulva possesses an intrinsic heat, shut in a solid heart and pent-up breast. Its fire communicates itself to him that enters it. It equals in intensity the fire of love. She is as tight as a well-fitting shoe, smaller than the circle of the apple of the eye. Al-Ladith, or the delicious. It has a reputation of procuring an unexampled pleasure, comparable only to the one felt by the beasts and the birds of prey, and for which they fight sanguinary combats. And if such effects are produced upon animals, what must they be for man? And so it is that all wars spring from the search for the voluptuous pleasure which the vagina procures, and which is the highest fortune of this world. It is a part of the delights of paradise awarded to us by God as a foretaste of what is waiting for us, namely delights 1,000 times superior, and above which only the sight of benevolent God is to be placed. More names might certainly be found applicable to the sexual organs of woman, but the number of those mentioned above appears to me ample. The principal object of this work is to collect together all the remarkable and attractive matters concerning coitus, so that he who is in trouble may find consolation in it, and a man to whom erection offers difficulties may be able to look into it for a remedy against his weakness. Wise physicians have written that people whose members have lost their strength and are afflicted with impotence should assiduously read books treating of coition, and should study carefully the different kinds of love-making in order to recover their former vigor. A certain means of provoking erection is to look at animals in the act of coition. was everywhere possible to see animals whilst in the act of copulation, books on the subject of generation are indispensable. In every country, large or small, both the rich and poor have a taste for this sort of book, which may be compared to the stone of philosophy transforming common metals into gold. It is related, and penetrates the most obscure matters and is most wise, that once upon a time, before the reign of the great Caliph Harun al-Rashid, there lived a buffoon who was the amusement of women, old people and children. His name was Jaedi. Many women granted him their favors freely, and he was much liked and well received by all. By princes, viziers, and qadis, he was likewise very well treated. In general, all the world pampered him at that time. Indeed, any man that was a buffoon enjoyed the greatest considerations, for which the poets have said, "O time, of all the dwellers here below, you only elevate buffoons or fools, or him whose mother was a prostitute, or him whose anus as an inkstand serves, or him who from his youth has been a pander, who has no other work but to bring the two sexes together." Jaedi related the following story. The story of Jaedi and Fatihat al-Jamal. I was in love with a woman who was all grace and perfection, beautiful of shape and gifted with all imaginable charms. Her cheeks were like roses, her forehead lily white, her lips like coral. She had teeth like pearls and breasts like pomegranates. Her mouth opened round like a ring, her tongue seemed to be encrusted with precious gems. Her eyes, black and finely slit, had the languor of slumber, and her voice the sweetness of sugar. With her form pleasantly filled out, her flesh was mellow like fresh butter and pure as the diamond. As to her vulva, it was white, prominent, round as an arch. The center of it was red and breathed fire without a trace of humidity, for, sweet to the touch, it was quite dry. When she walked in, it showed in relief like a dome or an inverted cup. In reclining, it was visible between her thighs, looking like a kid couched on a hillock. This woman was my neighbor. All the others played and laughed with me, jested with me, and met my suggestions with great pleasure. I revelled in their kisses, their close embraces and nibbling, and in sucking their lips, breasts, and necks. I had coition with all of them except my neighbor, and it was exactly her I wanted to possess in preference to all the rest. But instead of being kind to me, she avoided me rather. When I contrived to take her aside to trifle with her and try to rouse her gaiety, and spoke to her of my desires, she recited to me the following verses, the sense of which was mystery to me. Among the mountain tops I saw a tent placed firmly, apparent to all eyes high up in midair. But oh, the pole that held it up was gone, and like a vase without a handle it remained, with all its cords undone, its center sinking in, forming a hollow like that of a kettle. Every time I told her of my passion, she answered me with these verses, which to me were void of meaning, and to which I could make no reply, which, however, only excited my love all the more. I therefore inquired of all those I knew, amongst wise men, philosophers, and savants, the meaning, but not one of them could solve the riddle for me, so as to satisfy my hate and appease my passion. Nevertheless, I continued my investigations until at last I heard of a savant named Abu Nawas, who lived in a far-off country, and who I was told was the only man capable of solving the enigma. I betook to him, appraised him of the distress I had with the woman, and recited to him the above-mentioned verses. Abu Nawas said to me, "This woman loves you to the exclusion of every other man. She is very corpulent and plump." I answered, "It is exactly as you say. You have given her likeness as if she were before you, accepting what you say in respect of her love for me, for until now she has never given me any proof of it. She has no husband. Is this so?" I said. Then he added, "I have reason to believe that your member is of small dimensions, and such a member cannot give her pleasure, nor quench her fire, for what she wants is a lover with a member like that of an ass. Perhaps it may not be so. Tell me the truth about this." When I had assured him on that point, affirming that my member, which began to rise at the expression of his doubtings, was full-sized, he told me that in that case all difficulties would disappear, and explained to me the sense of the verses as follows. The tent, firmly planted, represents the vulva of grand dimensions and placed well forward. The mountains between which it rises are the thighs. The stake, which supported its center and has been torn up, means that she has no husband, comparing the stake or pole that supports the tent to the virile member holding up the lips of the vulva. She is like a vase without a handle. This means, if the pail is without a handle to hang it up by, it is good for nothing. The pail representing the vulva and the handle the verge. The cords are undone and its center is sinking in. That is to say, as the tent without a supporting pole caves in at the center, inferior in this respect to the vault which remains upright without support, so can the woman who has no husband not enjoy complete happiness? From the words, it forms a hollow like that of a kettle. You may judge how lascivious God has made that woman in her comparisons. She likens her vulva to a kettle, which serves to prepare the tharid. Listen, if the tharid is placed in a kettle, to turn it out well, it must be stirred by means of a madalik, long and solid, whilst the kettle is steadied by the feet and hands. Only in that way it can be properly prepared. It cannot be done with a small spoon. The cook would burn her hands owing to the shortness of the handle, and the dish would not be well prepared. This is the symbol of this woman's nature, Jaedi. If your member has not the dimensions of a respectable madalik, serviceable to the good preparation of the tharid, it will not give her satisfaction. And moreover, if you do not hold her close to your chest and lace her with your hands and feet, it is useless to solicit her favors. Finally, if you let her consume herself by her own fire, like the bottom of a kettle which gets burned till the madalik is not stirred upon it, you will not gratis her desire by the result. You see now what prevented her from acceding to your wishes. She was afraid that you would not be able to quench her flame after having found it. But what is the name of this woman, Jaedi? Fadahat al-Jamal, sunrise of beauty, I replied. Return to her, said the sage, and take her these verses, and your affair will come to a happy issue, please God. You will then come back to me and inform me what will have come to pass between you. I gave my promise, and Abu Nawas recited to me the following lines. Have patience now, O Fadahat al-Jamal. I understand your words, and all shall see how I obey them. O you, beloved and cherished by whoever, can revel in your arms and glory in them. O apple of my eye, you thought I was embarrassed, but the answer which I had to give you, yes, certainly. It was the love I bore you made me look foolish in the eyes of all you know. They thought I was possessed by a demon, called me a merry andrew and buffoon. For God, what of buffoonery of God? Should it be that no other member is like mine? Here, see it, measure it. What woman tastes it falls in love with me. In violent love, it is a well-known fact that you from afar may see it like a column. If it erects itself, it lifts my robe and shames me. Now take it kindly, put it in your tent, which is between the well-known mountains placed. It will be quite at home there. You will find it, not softening while inside, but sticking like an eel. Take it to form the handle of your vase. Come and examine it, and notice well how vigorous it is and long in its erection. If you want but a proper madalik, a madalik to use between your thighs, take this to stir the center of your kettle. It will do good to you, O mistress mine. Your kettle, be it plated, will be satisfied. Having learned these verses by heart, I took my leave of Abu Nawas and returned to Fadihat al-Jamal. She was, as usual, alone. I gave a slight knock at her door, and she came out at once, beautiful as the rising sun, and coming up to me, she said, "O enemy of God, what business has brought you here to me at this time?" I answered her, "O my mistress, a business of great importance." "Explain yourself, and I will see whether I can help you," she said. "I shall not speak to you about it until the door is locked," I answered. "Your boldness today is very great," she said. And I, "True, O my mistress, boldness is one of my qualities." She then addressed me thus, "O enemy of yourself, O you most miserable of your race, if I were to lock the door and you have nothing wherewith to satisfy my desires, what should I do with you? Face of a Jew! You will let me share your couch and grant me your favors." She began to laugh, and after we had entered the house, she told a slave to lock the house door. As usual, I asked her to respond to my proposals. She then recited to me again the above-mentioned verses. When she had finished, I began to recite to her those which Abu Nawas had taught me. As I proceeded, I saw her more and more moved. I observed her giving way to yawns, to stretch herself, to sigh. I knew now I should arrive at the desired result. When I had finished, my member was in such a state of erection that it became like a pillar, still lengthening. When Fatihat al-Jamal saw it in that condition, she precipitated herself upon it, took it into her hands, and drew it towards her thighs. And then I said, "O apple of my eyes, this may not be done here. Let us go into the chamber." She replied, "Leave me alone, son of a debauched woman. Before God, I am losing my senses in seeing your member getting longer and longer and lifting your robe. Oh, what a member! I never saw a finer one. Let it penetrate into this delicious plump vulva, which maddens all who hear it described, for the sake of which so many have died of love, and of which your superiors and masters themselves have not been able to get possession." I repeated, "I shall not do it anywhere else than in your chamber." She answered, "If you do not enter this minute this tender vulva, I shall die." As I still insisted upon her carrying it to her room, she cried, "No, it is quite impossible. I cannot wait so long." I saw, in fact, her lips tremble, her eyes filling with tears. A general tremor ran over her. She changed colour and laid herself down upon her back, baring her thighs, the whiteness of which made her flesh appear like crystal tinged with carmine. Then I examined her vulva, a white copula with a purple centre, soft and charming. It opened like that of a mare on the approach of a stallion. At that moment she seized my member and kissed it, by saying, "By the religion of my father, it must enter, it must penetrate into my vulva." And drawing nearer to me, she pulled it towards her vagina. I now hesitated no longer to assist her with my member, and placed it against the entrance of her vulva. As soon as the head of my member touched the lips, the whole body of Fatihat al-Jamal trembled with excitement. Sighing and sobbing, she held me pressed to her bosom. Again I profited by this moment to admire the beauties of her vulva. It was magnificent, its purple centre setting off its whiteness all the more. It was round and without any imperfection, projecting like a splendidly curved dome over her belly. In one word, it was a masterpiece of creation, as fine as could be seen, the blessing of God, the best creator, upon it. And the woman who possessed this wonder had in her time no superior. Seeing her then in such transports, trembling like a bird, the throat of which has been cut, I pushed my dart into her. Thinking she might not be able to take in the whole of my member, I had entered cautiously. But she moved her buttocks furiously, saying to me, "This is not enough for my contentment." Making a strong push, I lodged my member completely in her, which made her utter a painful cry, but the moment after she moved with greater fury than before. She cried, "Do not miss the corners, neither high nor low, but above all things do not neglect the centre, the centre." She repeated, "If you feel it coming, let it go into my matrix so as to extinguish my fire." Then we moved alternately in and out, which was delicious. Our legs were interlaced, our muscles unbent. So we went on with kisses and claspings until the crisis came upon us simultaneously. We then rested and took breath after this mutual conflict. I wanted to withdraw my member, but she would not consent to this, and begged of me not to take it out. I acceded to her wish, but a moment later she took it out herself, dried it, and replaced it in her vulva. We renewed our game, kissing, pressing, and moving in rhythm. After a short time we rose and entered her chamber, without having this time accomplished the enjoyment. She gave me now a piece of an aromatic root, which she recommended to keep in my mouth, assuring me that as long as I had it there, my member would remain on the alert. She then asked me to lie down, which I did. She mounted upon me, and taking my member into her hands, she made it entirely enter into her vagina. I was astonished at the vigour of her vulva and at the heat emitted from it. The moment the opening of her matrix in particular excited my admiration. I never had an experience like it. It closely clasped my member and pinched the gland. With the exception of Fatihat al-Jamal, no woman had until then taken in my member to its full length. She was able to do so, I believe, owing to her being very plump and corpulent, and her vulva being large and deep. Fatihat al-Jamal, astride upon me, began to rise and descend. She kept crying out, wept, went slower, then accelerated her movements again, ceased to move altogether. When part of my member became visible, she looked at it, then took it out altogether to examine it closely, then to plunge it in again until it disappeared completely. So she continued until the enjoyment overcame her again. At last, having dismounted from me, she now laid herself down and asked me to go on to her. I did so, and she introduced my member entirely into her vulva. We thus continued our caresses, changing our positions in turns until night came on. I thought it would be proper to show a wish to go now, but she would not agree to this, and I had to give her my word that I would remain. I said to myself, this woman will not let me go at any price. When daylight comes, God will advise me. I remained with her, and all night long we kept caressing each other, and took but scanty rest. I counted that during that day and night I accomplished 27 times the act of coitus, and I became afraid that I should never more be able to leave the house of that woman. Having at last made good my escape, I went to visit Abu Nawas again and informed him of all that happened. He was surprised and stupefied, and his first words were, "Oh, Jahdi, you can have neither authority nor power over such a woman, and she would make you do penance for all the pleasure you've had with the other women." However, Fadihat al-Jamal proposed to me to become her legitimate husband, in order to put a stop to the vexatious rumors that were circulating about her conduct. I, on the other hand, was only on the look for adultery. Asking the advice of Abu Nawas about it, he told me, "If you marry Fadihat al-Jamal, you will ruin your health, and God will withdraw his protection from you, and the worst of all will be that she will cuckold you, for she is insatiable with respect to coitus, and would cover you with shame." And I answered him, such is the nature of women, they are insatiable as far as their vulvas are concerned, and so long as their lust is satisfied, they do not care whether it be with a buffoon, a negro, a valet, or even with a man that is despised and reprobated by society. On this occasion, Abu Nawas depicted the character of women in the following verses. "Women are demons, and were born as such. No one can trust them, as is known to all. If they love a man, it is only out of caprice, and he to whom they are most cruel loves them most. Beings full of treachery and trickery, I aver the man who loves you truly is a lost man. He who believes me not can prove my word by letting woman's love get hold of him for years. If in your generous mood you have given them your all and everything for years and years, they will say afterwards, 'I swear by God, my eyes have never seen a thing he gave me.' After you have impoverished yourself for their sake, their cry from day to day will be forever, 'Give! Give, man, get up and buy and borrow.' If they cannot profit by you, they'll turn against you. They will tell lies about you and calumniate you. They do not recoil to use a slave in the master's absence, if once their passions are aroused, and they play tricks. Assuredly, if once their vulva is in rut, they only think of getting some member in erection. Preserve us, God, from woman's trickery, and of old women in particular. So be it." End of chapter 9. End of section 7. Section 8 of The Perfumed Garden by Sheikh Nefzaoui, translated by Richard Burton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read to you by Ali Makki. Chapter 10. Concerning the organs of generation of animals. Know, O Vizier, God's blessing be with you, that the sexual organs of the various male animals are not analogous with the different natures of the male members which I have mentioned. The verges of animals are classed according to the species to which they belong, and these species are 4 in number. 1. The verges of animals with hoofs, as the horse, mule, ass, which verges are of larger size. Al-Farmud, the colossus. Abu Dimagh, the one with a head. Al-Kas, the serpent rolled up. Abu Barnata, the one with a hat. Al-Fallag, the splitter. Al-Karkit, the pointed staff. Al-Zit, the club. Al-Qantara, the bridge. Al-Harmak, the indomitable. Al-Razama, the mallet. Al-Munaffakh, the swollen. Abu Shamla, the fighter. 2. The verges of animals which have the kind of feet called akhfaf, as for instance the camel. Al-Ma'lum, the well-known. Al-Burzghal, the swinging one. Al-Tawil, the long one. Al-Mukhabbi, the hidden one. Al-Sharita, the ribbon. Al-Shaghab, the tuft. Al-Mustaqim, the firm one. Thaqil al-Ifaqa, the slow coach. 3. The verges of animals with split hoofs, like the ox and the sheep, etc. Al-Asab, the nerve. Raqiq al-Ras, the small head. al-Qurfaj, the rod, al-Tawil, the long one, al-Sawt, the whip, al-Isuf, the nervous, for the ram. 4. And lastly, the members of animals with claws, as the lion, fox, dog, and other animals of this species. Al-Qadib, the verge, Al-Mutamaghit, the one that will lengthen, Al-Kammus, the great gland. It is believed that all of the animals of God's creation, the lion is the most expert in respect to coition. If he meets the lioness, he examines her before copulation. He will know if she has already been covered by a male. When she comes to him, he smells at her, and if she has allowed herself to be crossed by a boar, he knows it immediately by the odor that animal has left upon her. He then smells her urine, and if the examination proves unfavorable, he gets into a rage and begins to lash with his tail right and left. Woe to the animal that comes at that time near him, it is certain to be torn to pieces. He then returns to the lioness, who, seeing that he knows all, trembles with terror. He smells again at her, utters a roar which makes mountains shake, and falling upon her lacerates her back with his claws. He will even go as far as to kill her and then befoul her body with his urine. It is said that the lion is most jealous and most intelligent of all animals. It is also averred that he is generous and spares him who gets round him by fair words. A man who, on meeting a lion, uncovers his sexual parts, causes him to take a flight. Whoever pronounces before a lion the name of Daniel, hail be to him, also sends him flying, because the Prophet, hail be to him, has enjoined this upon the lion in respect to the invocation of his name. Therefore, when this name is pronounced, the lion departs without doing any harm. Several cases which prove this fact are cited. End of chapter 10. End of section 8. Section 9 of The Perfumed Garden by Sheikh Nefzaoui, translated by Richard Burton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by al-Nafzawi. Chapter 11. On the Deceits and Treacheries of Women. Know, O Vizier, to whom God be good, that the stratagems of women are numerous and ingenious. Their tricks will deceive Satan himself, for God the Highest has said in the Quran, chapter 12, verse 28, that the deceptive faculties of women are great, and He has likewise said in the Quran, chapter 6, verse 38, that the stratagems of Satan are weak. Comparing the word of God as to the ruses of Satan and woman contained in these two verses, it is easy to see how great these latter ones are. Deceived husband being convicted himself of infidelity. It is related that a man fell in love with a woman of great beauty and possessing all perfections imaginable. He had made many advances to her which were repulsed. Then he had endeavoured to seduce her by rich presents, which were likewise declined. He lamented, complained, and was prodigal with his money in order to conquer her, but to no purpose, and he grew lean as a spectre. This lasted for some time, when he made the acquaintance of an old woman, whom he took into his confidence, complaining bitterly about it. She said to him, "I shall help you, please God." Forthwith she made her way to the house of the woman, in order to get an interview with her. But on arriving there, the neighbours told her that she could not get in, because the house was guarded by a ferocious bitch, who did not allow anyone to come in or depart, and in her malignity always flew at the faces of people. Hearing this, the old woman rejoiced and said to herself, "I shall succeed, please God." She then went home and filled a basket with bits of meat. Thus provided, she returned to the woman's house and went in. The bitch, on seeing her, rose to spring at her, but she produced the basket with its contents and showed it her. As soon as the brute saw the viands, it showed its satisfaction by the movements of its tail and nostrils. The old woman, putting down the basket before it, spoke to it as follows: "Eat, O my sister. Your absence has been painful to me. I did not know what had become of you,
and I have been looking for you a long time. Appease your hunger."
While the animal was eating, and she stroked its back, the mistress of the house came to see who was there, and was not a little surprised to see the bitch, which would never suffer anybody to come near her, so friendly with a strange person. She said, "Oh, old woman, how is it that you know our dog?" The old woman gave no reply, but continued to caress the animal and utter lamentations. Then said the mistress of the house to her, "My heart aches to see you thus. Tell me the cause of your sorrow."
"This bitch," said the woman, "was formerly a woman and my best friend. One fine day she was invited with me to a wedding. She put on her best clothes and adorned herself with her finest ornaments. We then went together. On our way we were accosted by a man, who at the sight of her was seized with the most violent love, but she would not listen to him. Then he offered brilliant presents, which she also declined. This man, meeting her some days later, said to her, 'Surrender yourself to my passion, or else I shall conjure God to change you into a bitch.' She answered, 'Conjure as much as you like.' The man then called the maledictions of heaven upon that woman, and she was changed into a bitch, as you see here." At these words the mistress of the house began to cry and lament, saying, "Oh, my mother, I am afraid that I shall meet the same fate as this bitch." "Why, what have you done?"
said the old woman. The other answered, "There is a man who has loved me since a long time, and I have refused to accede to his desires, nor did I listen to him, though the saliva was dried up in his mouth by his supplications, and in spite of the largest expenses he had gone to in order to gain my favour, I have always answered him that I should not consent, and now, oh my mother, I am afraid that he might call to God to curse me."
"Tell me how to know this man," said the old woman, "for fear that you might become like this animal."
"But how will you find him? And whom could I send to him?" The old woman answered,
"My daughter of mine, I shall render you this service and find him."
"Make haste, O my mother, and see him before he conjures God against me."
"I shall find him still this day," answered the old woman, "and please God you shall meet him tomorrow."
With this the old woman took her leave, went on the same day to the man who had made her his confidant, and told him of the meeting arranged for the next day. So the next day the mistress of the house went to the old woman, for they had agreed that the rendezvous should take place there. When she arrived at the house, she waited for some time, but the lover did not come. No doubt he had been prevented from making his appearance by some matter of importance. The old woman, reflecting upon this mischance, thought to herself, "There is no might, no power but in God the Great." But she could not imagine what might have kept him away. Looking at the woman, she saw that she was agitated, and it was apparent that she wanted coition hotly. She got more and more restless, and presently asked, "Why does he not come?" The old woman made answer,
"Oh, my daughter, some serious affair must have interfered, probably necessitating a journey, but I shall help you under these circumstances."
She then put on her malahfa and went to look for the young man, but it was to no purpose, as she could not find out anything about him. Still continuing her search, the old woman was thinking,
"This woman is at this moment eagerly coveting a man. Why not try today another young man who might calm her ardor? Tomorrow I shall find the right one."
As she was thus walking and thinking, she met a young man of very pleasing exterior. She saw at once that he was a fit lover, and likely to help her out in her perplexity, and she spoke to him.
"Oh, my son, if I were to set you in a connection with a lady, beautiful, graceful, and perfect, would you make love to her?"
"If your words are true, I would give you this golden dinar," said he. The old woman, quite enchanted, took the money and conducted him to her house. Now it so happened that this young man was the husband of the lady, which the old woman did not know till she had brought him. And the way she found it out was this. She went first into the house and said to the lady, "I have not been able to find the slightest trace of your lover, but failing him, I have brought you somebody to quench your fire for today. We will save the other for tomorrow. God has inspired me to do so." The lady then went to the window to take a look at him whom the old woman wanted to bring to her, and getting sight of him, she recognized her husband. Just on the point of entering the house, she did not hesitate, but hastily donning her malahfa, she went straight to him, and striking him in the face, she exclaimed, "Oh, enemy of God and of yourself, what are you doing here? You surely came with the intention to commit adultery. I have been suspecting you for a time, and waited here every day while I was sending out the old woman to inveigle you to come in. This day I have found you out, and denial is of no use, and you always told me that you were not a rake. I shall demand a divorce this very day, now I know your conduct." The husband, believing that his wife spoke the truth, remained silent and abashed. Learn from this the deceitfulness of woman and what she is capable of. Story of the lover against his will. A story is told of a certain woman who was desperately in love with one of her neighbors, whose virtue and piety were well known. She declared to him her passion, but finding all her advances constantly repulsed, in spite of all her wiles, she resolved to have her satisfaction nevertheless, and this is the way she went to work her purpose. One evening she apprised her negress that she intended to set a snare for that man, and the negress by her order left the street door open. Then in the middle of the night she called the negress and gave her the following instruction: "Go and knock with this stone at our street door as hard as you can, without taking any notice of the cries I shall utter or the noise I shall make. As soon as you hear the neighbor opening his door, come back and knock the same way at the inner door. Take care that he does not see you, and come in actually." Now the neighbor was by nature a compassionate man, always disposed to assist people in distress, and his help was never asked in vain. On hearing the noise of the blows struck at the door and the cries of his neighbor, he asked his wife what this might mean, and she replied, "It is our neighbor so and so who is attacked in her house by thieves." He went in great haste to her aid, but scarcely had he entered the house when the negress closed the door upon him. The woman seized him and uttered loud screams. He protested, but the mistress of the house put, without any more ado, this condition before him: "If you do not consent to do with me so and so, I shall tell that you have come in here to violate me, and hence all this noise." "The will of God be done," said the man. "Nobody can go against him, nor escape from his might." He then tried sundry subterfuges in order to escape, but in vain, for the mistress of the house recommenced to scream and make a row, which brought a good many people to the spot. He saw that his reputation would be compromised if he continued his resistance, and surrendered, saying, "Save me, I am ready to satisfy you." "Go into this chamber and close the door behind you," said the lady of the house. "If you want to leave this house with honor, do not attempt escape unless you wish those people to know that you are the author of all this commotion." Then he saw how determined she was to have her way. He did as she had told him. She, on her part, went out to the neighbors that had come to help her, and giving them some kind of explanation, dismissed them, and went away condoling with her. Left alone, she shut the door. She kept Learn from this the deceitfulness of women and what they are capable of. Larceny of love. The following story is told of two women who inhabited the same house. The husband of one of them had a member long, thick and hard, while the husband of the other had, on the contrary, that organ little, insignificant and soft. The first one rose always pleasant and smiling. The other one got up in the morning in tears and vexation. One day the two women were together and spoke of their husbands. The first one said, "I live in the greatest happiness. My bed is a couch of bliss. When my husband and I are together in it, It is the witness of our supreme pleasure, of our kisses and embraces, of our joys and amorous sighs. When my husband's member is in my vulva, it tops it completely. It stretches itself out until it touches the bottom of my vagina, and it does not take its leave until it has visited every corner, threshold, vestibule, ceiling, and center. When the crisis arrives, it takes its position in the very center of the vagina, which it floods with tears. It is in this way we quench our fire and appease our passion. The second answered, I live in the greatest grief. Our bed is a bed of misery, and our coition is a union of fatigue and trouble, of hate and malediction. When my husband's member enters my vulva, there is a space left open, and it's so short it can't touch the bottom. When it is in erection, it is twisted all ways, and cannot procure any pleasure. Feeble and meagre, it can scarcely ejaculate a drop, and its service cannot afford pleasure to any woman. Such was the almost daily conversation which the two women had together. It happened, however, that the woman who had so much cause for complaint thought in her heart how delightful it would be to commit adultery with the other one's husband. She thought to herself, it must be brought about, if it only be for once. Then she watched her opportunity until her husband had to be absent for a night from the house. In the evening she made preparation to get her project carried out, and perfumed herself with sweet scents and essence. Then the night was advanced to about a third of its duration. She noiselessly entered the chamber in which the other woman and her husband were sleeping, and groped her way to their couch. Finding that there was a free space between them, she slipped in. There was scant room, but each of the spouses thought it was the pressure of the other, and gave way a little, so she contrived to glide between them. She then quietly waited until the other woman was in profound sleep, and then, approaching the husband, she brought her flesh in contact with his. He awoke, and smelling the perfumed odours which she exhaled, he was in erection at once. He drew her towards him, but she said in a low voice, "Let me go to sleep." He answered, "Quiet, and let me do it. The children will not hear anything." Then she pressed close up to him, so as to get him farther away from his wife, and said, "Do as you like, but do not awaken the children who are close by." She took the precaution for fear that his wife would wake up. The man, however, roused by the odour of the perfumes, drew her ardently towards him. She was plump and mellow, and her vulva projecting. He mounted upon her and Take the member in your hand as usual." She took it, and was astonished at its size and magnificence, then introduced it to her vulva. The man, however, observed that his member had been taken in entirely, which he had never been able to do with his wife. The woman, on her part, found that she had never received such a benefit from her husband. The man was quite surprised. He worked his will upon her a second and third time, but his astonishment only increased. At last he got off her and stretched himself along her side. As soon as the woman found that he was asleep, she slipped out, left the chamber, and returned to her own. In the morning, the husband, on rising, said to his wife, "Your embraces have never seemed so sweet to me as last night. I never breathed such sweet perfumes as those you exhaled." "What embraces and what perfumes are you speaking of?" asked the wife. "I have not a particle of perfume in the house." She called him a storyteller, and assured him that he must have been dreaming. He then began to consider whether he might not have deceived himself, and agreed with his wife that he must actually have dreamed it all. Appreciate, after this, the deceitfulness of women, and what they are capable of. Story of the woman with the two husbands. It is related that a man, after having lived for some time in the country to which he had gone, became desirous of getting married. He addressed himself to an old woman who had experience in such matters, asking her whether she could find him a wife. And she replied, "I can find you a girl gifted with great beauty, and perfect in shape and comeliness. She will surely suit you, for besides of having these qualities, she is virtuous and pure.
Only mark, her business occupies her all day, but during the night she will be yours completely. It is for this reason she keeps herself reserved, as she apprehends that her husband might not agree to this."
The man replied, "This girl need not be afraid. I too am not at liberty during the day, and I only want her for the night." He then asked her in marriage. The old woman brought her to him, and he liked her. From that time they lived together, observing the conditions under which they had come together. The man had an intimate friend, whom he introduced to the old woman, who had arranged his marriage according to the conditions mentioned, and which friend had requested the man to ask her to do him the same service. They went to the old woman and solicited her assistance in the matter.
"This is very easy," she said. "I know a girl of great beauty who will dissipate your heaviest troubles. Only the business she is carrying on keeps her at work all night, but she will be your friend all day long."
"This shall be no hindrance," replied the friend. She then brought the young girl to him. He was pleased with her, and married her on the conditions agreed upon. But before long the two friends found out that the two wives which the old harridan had procured them were only one woman. Appreciate, after this, the deceitfulness of women, and what they are capable of. Story of Bahia. It is related that a woman of the name of Bahia, or Splendid Beauty, had a lover whose relations to her were soon a mystery to no one, for which reason she had to leave him. Her absence affected him to such a degree that he fell ill because he could not see her. One day he went to see one of his friends and asked him, "Oh, my brother, an ungovernable desire has seized me, and I can wait no more. Could you accompany me on a visit I am going to pay to Bahia, the well-beloved of my heart?" The friend declared himself willing. The next day they mounted their horses, and after a journey of 2 days they arrived near the place where Bahia dwelt. There they stopped. The lover said to his friend, "Go and see the people that live about there, and ask for their hospitality. But take care not to divulge our intentions, and try in particular to find the servant girl of Bahia, to whom you can say that I am here, and whom you will charge with a message to her mistress, that I would like to see her." He then described the servant maid to him. The friend went, met the servant, and told her all that was necessary. She went at once to Bahia, and repeated to her what she had been told. Bahia sent to the friend a message: "Inform him who sent you that the meeting will take place tonight, near such and such a tree, at such and such an hour." Returning to the lover, the friend communicated to him the decision of Bahia about the rendezvous. At the hour that had been fixed, the two friends were near to the tree. They had not waited long for Bahia. As soon as her lover saw her coming, he rushed to meet her, kissed her, pressed her to his heart, and they began to embrace and caress each other. The lover said to her, "Oh, Bahia, is there no way to enable us to pass the night together without rousing the suspicion of your husband?" She answered, "Oh, before God, if it will give you pleasure, the means to contrive this are not wanting." "Hasten," said her lover, "to let me know how it may be done." She then asked him, "Your friend here, is he devoted to you and intelligent?" He answered, "Yes." She then rose, took off her garments, and handed them to the friend, who gave her his, in which she then dressed herself. Then she made the friend put on her clothes. The lover said, surprised, "What are you going to do?" "Be silent," she answered. And addressing herself to the friend, she gave him the following explanations: "Go to my house and lie down in my bed. After a third part of the night is past, my husband will come and ask you for the pot into which they milk the camels. You will then take up the vase, but you must keep it in your hands until he takes it from you. This is our usual way. Then he will go and return with a pot filled with milk, and say to you, 'Here is the pot,' but you must not take it from him until he has repeated these words. Then take it out of his hands, or let him put it on the ground himself. After that you will not see anything more of him till morning. After the pot has been put on the ground and my husband gone, drink the third part of the milk and replace the pot on the ground." The friend went, observed all these recommendations, and when the husband returned with a pot full of milk, he did not take it out of his hands until he had said twice, "Here is the pot." Unfortunately, he withdrew his hands when the husband was going to set it down. The latter, thinking the pot was being held, let it go, and the vase fell upon the ground and was broken. The husband, in the belief that he was speaking to his wife, exclaimed, "What have you been thinking of?" and beat him with a switch till it broke, then took another and continued to batter him, stroke on stroke, enough to break his back. The mother and sister of Bahia came running to the spot to tear her from his hands. He had fainted. Luckily, they succeeded in getting the husband away. The mother of Bahia soon came back and talked to him so long that he was fairly sick of her talk, but he could not do nothing but be silent and weep. At last she finished, saying,
"Have confidence in God and obey your husband. As for your lover, he cannot come now and see and console you, but I will send your sister to keep you company."
And so she went away. She did send, indeed, the sister of Bahia, who began to console her and curse him who had beaten her. He felt his heart warming towards her, for he had seen that she was of resplendent beauty, endowed with all perfections, and like the full moon in the night. He placed her hand over her mouth so as to prevent her from speaking, and said to her, "Oh, lady, I'm not what you think. Your sister Bahia is at present with her lover. I have run into danger to do her a service. Will you not take me under your protection? If you denounce me, your sister will be covered with shame. As for me, I have done my part, but evil may fall back upon you." The young girl began to tremble like a leaf, in thinking of the consequences of her sister's doing, and then beginning to laugh, surrendered herself to the friend who had proved himself so true. They passed the remainder of the night in bliss, kisses, embraces, and mutual enjoyment. He found her the best of the best. In her arms he forgot the beating he had received, and they did not cease to play, toy, and make love till daybreak. He then returned to his companion. Bahia asked him how he had fared, and he said to her, "Ask your sister. By my faith, she knows it all. Only know that we have passed the night in mutual pleasure, kissing and enjoying ourselves until now." They exchanged clothes again, each one taking his own, and the friend told Bahia all the particulars of what happened to him. Appreciate after this the deceitfulness of women and what they are capable of. The story of the man who was an expert in stratagems and was duped by a woman. The story is told of a man who had studied all the ruses and all the stratagems invented by women for the deception of men, and boasted that no woman could dupe him. A woman of great beauty and full of charms got to hear of his conceit. She therefore prepared for him in the majlis a collation, in which several kinds of wine figured, and nothing was wanting in the way of rare and choice viands. She then sent for him and invited him to come and see her. As she was famed for her great beauty and the rare perfection of her person, she had roused his desires, and he made haste to avail himself of her invitation. She was dressed in her finest garments and exhaled the choicest perfumes, and assuredly whoever had thus seen her would have been troubled in his mind. And thus, when he was admitted into her presence, he was fascinated by her charms and plunged into admiration of her marvelous beauty. This woman, however, appeared to be preoccupied on account of her husband, and allowed it to be seen that she was afraid of his coming back from one minute to another. It must be mentioned that this husband was very proud, very jealous, and very violent, and would not have hesitated to shed the blood of anyone whom he would have found prowling about his house. What would have he done, and with much more reason, to the man whom he might have found inside? While the lady and he who flattered himself that he should possess her were amusing themselves in the majlis, a knock at the house door filled the lover with fear and trouble, particularly when the lady cried, "It is my husband who is returning." All in tremble, she hid him in the closet which was in the room, shut the door upon him, and left the key in the majlis. Then she opened the house door. Her husband, for it was he, saw on entering the wine and all the preparations that had been made. Surprised, he asked what this meant. "It means what you see," she answered. "But for whom is all this?" he asked. "It is for my lover, whom I have here." "And where is he?" "In this closet," she said, pointing her finger to the place where the sufferer was confined. At these words the husband started. He rose and went to the closet, but found it locked. "Where's the key?" he said. She answered, "Here," throwing it to him. But as he was putting it into the lock, she burst out laughing uproariously. He turned towards her and said, "What are you laughing at?" "I laugh," she answered, "at the weakness of your judgment, and your want of reason and reflection. Oh, you man without sense, do you think that if I had in reality a lover, and had admitted him into this room, I should have told you that he was here, and where he was hidden? That is certainly not likely. I had no other thought than to offer you a collation on your return, and wanted only to have a joke with you in doing as I did. If I had had a lover, I should certainly not have made you my confidant." The husband left the key in the lock of the closet without having turned it, returned to the table and said, "True, I rose, but I have not the slightest doubt about the sincerity of your words." Then they ate and drank together, and made love. The man in the closet had to stop there until the husband went out. And then the lady went to set him free, and found him quite undone, and in a bad state. When he came out after having escaped an imminent peril, she said to him, "Well, you wiseacre, who knows so well the stratagems of women, of all those you know, is there one equal to us?" He made answer, "I am now convinced that your stratagems are countless."
Appreciate after this the deceits of women and what they are capable of.
Story of the lover who was surprised by the unexpected arrival of the husband. It is related that a woman who was married to a violent and brutal man, having her lover with her, on the unexpected arrival of her husband, who was returning from a journey, had only just time to hide him under the bed. She was compelled to let him remain in this dangerous and unpleasant position, knowing of no expedient which might enable him to leave the house. In her restlessness, she went to and fro, and having gone to the street door, one of the neighbors, a woman, saw that she was in trouble and asked her the reason of it. She told her what had happened. The other then said, "Return into the house. I will charge myself with the safety of your lover, and I promise that he shall come out unharmed." Then the woman re-entered her house. Her neighbor was not long in joining her, and together they prepared the meal, and then they all sat down to eat and drink. The woman sat facing her husband, and the neighbor opposite the bed. The latter began to tell stories and anecdotes about the tricks of women, and the lover under the bed heard all that was going on. Pursuing her tales, the neighbor told the following one. A married woman had a lover whom she loved tenderly, and by whom she was equally loved. One day the lover came to her in the absence of her husband, but the latter happened to return home unexpectedly, just as they were together. The woman, knowing of no better place, hid her lover under the bed, then sat down by her husband, who was taking some refreshment, and joked and played with him. Amongst other playful games, she covered her husband's eyes with a napkin, and her lover took this opportunity to come out from under the bed and escape unobserved. The wife understood at once how to profit by this tale. Taking a napkin and covering the eyes of her husband with it, she said, "Then it was by means of this ruse that the lover was helped out of his dilemma." And the lover, taking opportunity, succeeded in making good his escape unobserved by the husband. Unconscious of what had happened, this latter laughed at the story, and his merriment was still increased by the last words of his wife and by her action. Appreciate after this the deceitfulness of women and what they are capable of. End of chapter 11. End of section 9.